Alright, so we're on day 2 of solving. Yesterday we looked at using algebra to solve one-step equations. We are still doing one-step equations until your quiz tomorrow. Hopefully you got a very solid foundation. Remember, we did the 4 choices, that if something is being added, you subtract it. If something is being subtracted, you add it. If something is directly attached or multiplied, you divide. And if something is on the bottom being divided, then you multiply by that number. Those are the only 4 choices that you need for the whole unit. You just have to make sure you practice those choices and practice showing those choices in the right order. And as I said, if you remember in this class, if you're not showing work, you lose a lot of points, so make sure you're working on that. The overall goal of this week is to get you away from doing cups and chips and transfer you over to the algebraic method, so be sure you are not using cups and chips anymore for the rest of the year. I've always had a couple of students every year who are just stubborn, and every time they see something they go back to cups and chips, which, yeah, you got the right answer, but I can't give you points if you did not do it using algebra. So please don't be stubborn. It's not a good thing. Keep in mind, again, you are at a fork in the road here with chapter 2, to where either you follow my directions and you end up with a decent year, even with a little struggle, because everybody struggles, but you don't want to go, or you want to go this way with me instead of going away from me and not being able to find me pretty much until you have to take the class again next year. So please make sure you are doing what I ask you to do. Practice it the way I'm asking you to practice. It's almost like if I'm a physical trainer for you and I'm asking you to do 10 push-ups a day, yeah, it might hurt, but if you do the 10 push-ups a day after a month, they're easy. Whereas if you don't do the 10 push-ups a day, or you cheat, or you do one push-up, counting to 10 and do something silly, then after a month you're not as strong as I need you to be, which means that you will never catch up to where we need to be because you got left behind. So again, we are at a very important moment today, or a moment right now. Make sure you are following me whatever I do, so that you can stay with me for the whole rest of the year. If you go this way, you can kind of go ahead and reserve your seat for Algebra 1 again next year, because it's tough to pass an algebra class if you are not paying attention. Quick review on yesterday, and I am going to move through these very quickly. Here was your x plus 9. Your cup was over here. We wanted to move a positive 9, and remember, this is like 9 positives, and the way we did that was we added 9 negatives. Here you even said 7 minus 9, it's opposite signs, and the negatives win by 2. Remember, I told you need to get better at that, or that you at least need to, right now, make sure you practice typing in 7 minus 9 or 7 plus negative 9, whatever way works best for you, to get the answer of negative 2. The second one, here you had the x with the negative 5 attached. Again, that's a negative 5, so you move that by adding positive 5 to both sides. Here, signs again are opposite, and the positives win by 2. And you either do that by doing negative, actually the only way you can do that is negative 3 plus 5, which shows you the answer is 2. On question C, I told you this is 6 times x, and you want to tear this 6 off of x, and the way you tear that off of x is by dividing. We learned that anytime you have the number over itself, that those numbers cancel, giving us just x. And if you have 30 negatives being shared with 6 people, everybody gets 5 negatives in that problem. Or if you go back to the original rules, negative divided by positive is a negative. And then what we learned on D is that if there's a number on the bottom, we simply multiply both sides by that number. Multiplying 4 by x, you get 4x over 4 equals 12. The two 4's on top and bottom cancel, and x is equal to 12 in that question. Again, the general rule for algebra is if you have the same thing on top and bottom, they cancel out. And then the last one that we did in a review is 3 halves x equals negative 9. Again, noticing that that 2 was on the bottom, we just multiply both parts by 2. 3 times 3 became 6 over 2x equals negative 2 times 9 is 18. 6 divided by 2 became 3. And then in order to tear that 3 off, we divide both sides by 3. Again, that cancels, giving us negative 6. Again, 18 negatives shared for 3 people is negative 6. The only difference between today and yesterday is I'm no longer going to protect you from the negatives. This is real life algebra, and all I did yesterday to make life easier is I took the tricky questions out and introduced the concept first. Today you're going to kind of adjust to the tricky portion of the concept, which is only one. It's just the negatives. The only rule that keeps algebra protected is that anything done to one side of an equation must be done to both sides of the equation. You've been doing this so far. There's a whole lot of things that you'll learn you have power to do in algebra to solve. and you're just kind of learning these tools as you go. This is why we add the same amount or subtract or multiply or divide the same amount every time. So today you're going to be faced with problems that have a negative sign in front of the variable. The fix is simple, but it's going to take practice to be sure that the answer is consistently correct. What I mean by that is there are people who do everything I ask all the time, they get them all right. There are people who do what I ask sometimes and they get some of them right. There are people who do what I ask none of the time and they get occasional some right. So you just want to work on getting them right all the time. Take pride in what you're doing. Let's look at some examples of what's going to be done today real fast before you move on to the part here. Here you have negative x equals 4. If you think about what a negative x looked like, it was a upside down cup. Remember that? And what we had was negative x equaled 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm using this kind of as a model. You will not do it this way. But negative x is a upside down cup. And the trick for this is, if you want to know what's inside of a cup and the cup is upside down and it's covering something up, can you see what's in the cup? That's a rhetorical question, by the way, because you really can't answer. But the answer is no, because the cup is upside down. And so what we must do is turn the cup right side up. Kind of like turn your frown upside down, but you turn the cup right side up. But if I flip this, the rule of algebra says that if I turn this cup over, then I must also turn everything else over. And the way negatives and positives work is when you turn a negative over or turn a positive over, it becomes negative, just like when you turn a negative over, it becomes positive. So in this case, if you are flipping everything, you're turning the cup right side up. That means you must turn all these 4 positives into negatives, and that's really all you're going to do in this problem. You're going to say, I cannot deal with a negative x, so I'll make a positive. And then I cannot deal with it, or because I flipped this x, I also have to flip the 4. That's all that it comes down to. So if you see a negative attached to x, before you do anything else, turn it right side up and then move from there. So looking at another question that you're going to see here, again, you can draw your line. What is with the cup? Get the cup alone first before you do any kind of flipping. But what is with this cup is a positive 3. Notice again, this is a positive 3 because there's nothing in front. The way you move a positive 3 is by subtracting 3. Now I know that this negative is here, but keep in mind that's attached to x. This is a positive 3. So we'll subtract 3 from both sides. These two things go away. A negative x comes down. That's the first part you got to be careful on today. And then 1 negative and 3 negative make 4 negatives. Again, if you want to check that, negative 1 plus negative 3 or negative 1 minus 3 gives you the same answer both ways. The problem now is, now that the cups are alone, they are all upside down. So again, get the cups alone first, recognize that they are upside down, and what we will do is flip everything over. So x becomes positive, which means that this 4 should also become positive, and that is our answer. So the work itself does not really change. It's just a matter of making sure that when you see the cups all by themselves and you notice that they're upside down, again, this is 2 cups, but they are turned upside down. So what we're going to do first is flip them right side up. So this becomes positive 2x. This becomes a negative 8. Now we want to get this 2 off of here, so we will divide by 2, divide by 2. Those go away. 8 negatives shared with 2 people would be 4 negatives each. Alright. Couple more things that you're going to see again today before we move on to the worksheet. Here again, the fraction is negative. I don't want to deal with this until I deal with the negative, so what we're going to do first is flip everything over, and notice it all comes down as just a positive x over 3, and then this negative 2 now becomes a positive 2. So it's just a pre-step. Now all you do is you say, I don't like the 3, so I'm going to get rid of the 3 by multiplying. This becomes 3x over 3 equals 6. 3's cancel out, of course, giving us x equals 6. And again, same thing here. The first thing we do is we don't like the negative attached to the fraction, so we make our fraction positive, but we must switch the other side as well. So 3/4 x equals negative 6. Now we can work this out by multiplying by 4 because we don't like the 4 on the bottom. This becomes 12 over 4x equals negative 24. 12 divided by 4 reduces to be 3. And if you want to tear this 3 off of the number, you divide by 3 on both sides. That goes away. giving us negative 8. So go ahead and pause the video and raise your hand so we can give you the participation worksheet. Again, you're going to work through this together, or we're going to work through this together, and then you're going to complete the rest of it alone before you move on to Math XL. Just a real quick reminder, again, there is a quiz on this tomorrow, so make sure that you get everything done, that you understand everything. This is going to be a big quiz, not one of those small ones that you've had before. So be ready for that. So looking at number 1, I'm not going to draw the line anymore, but again, if you want to, feel free, but we are on day 2, so I'm going to try to keep taking you away from the cups and chips. But what I notice here is that my x is negative, and so what we will do is simply switch that side, giving us the easy answer of x equals negative 5. Okay. Looking at number 2, same situation. Here's my x, but it's negative. I don't want it negative, so I will switch signs, which means that 9 should become positive. That stays equal. That becomes positive. That is my answer. X is equal to 9. Looking at number 3. Here is my x. It is with a 4. I don't worry about the sign yet because there's still a number over there, because remember I want the cups alone. So we move the 4 by subtracting 4, because remember this is a positive 4, and so we add negative 4 to both sides. These two things go away, bringing down negative x equals 6 minus 4 is 2. Now our big issue is that our x is negative, or as you would see, a cup is upside down, so we have to turn it right side up and turn the other part over too to get negative 2 as your answer. For proof of that, 4 minus negative 2 is 6, which means that yes, it does work. Looking at number 4, here's my x. Again, always locate your x, and the number that is with x right now is the positive 5. The way we get rid of the positive 5 is by adding a negative 5 to both sides. These two 5s cancel out. Negative 2 and negative 5, remember nothing cancels, so they all work together to get negative 7 equals, and remember this is a negative x. Now that I have a negative x, it means I need to switch its sign, but I need to switch everything, which means the 7 gets flipped around. Equals stays equals, because we'll learn later that it is actually flipping, it just looks the same, and x becomes positive. So my answer is x equals 7. So that's all of your addition, subtraction, or negative x problems. 5 through looks like 7, it's all pretty basic too. You just have to make sure that you do not divide by a negative number, and so what we do is we recognize that negative 3 times x, I don't like this negative, and make it your habit now please if you want to stay with me for the whole year, because I'm going to do this every time. It's going to make life easy. This negative needs to go away, so it turns into positive 3x equals negative 15. Now the way you take this 3 off is by dividing both sides by 3, canceling the 3's. 15 negatives shared with 3 people, negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. Again, the signs are different, so your answer is negative. Number 6, same thing. There's a negative 2 attached to x. I'm not going to divide yet. What I'm going to do instead is switch signs first. Getting 12 equals 2x. In order to take this 2 off of the x, now I must divide both sides by 2. Getting 6 equal to x. So not so bad. It's just a matter of making sure that when you see those negatives that you flip them over, and then when you mix that in with the work that we did yesterday, that's really where it's going to come into play. Number 7, again, you have a x here, you have a negative number attached. We don't want to deal with that negative number. We want to switch both sides first. Now that we have a regular 5, which is kind of like what we saw yesterday, we would divide both sides by 5. Those cancel, getting our answer as x equals negative 5. Then you look at, I think it's 8 through 12, no, 8 through 11. 8 through 11, same thing. I see a fraction, I know how to get rid of this, but there's a negative in front, so all we do is switch both sides first. Again, you have to make sure you switch both sides, and then you do the work you've been taught to do. I don't like the 5 on the bottom, so I multiply it to the top of both sides, getting 5x over 5 equals negative 10. The 5's cancel, bringing down x equaling negative 10. The four choices still stays the same. The only thing you added as a fifth choice is that if your x is negative, flip it over. Flip over both sides. So number 9, same thing. Once we recognize that we know how to get rid of this 8, but there's a negative in the way, flip both sides. Everything becomes the opposite. Now what we do is we get rid of this 8 on the bottom by multiplying by 8. We end up with 32 equals 8x, and we rip this 8 off by dividing by 8. That goes away. 32 divided by 8 is 4, and 4 is equal to x. Even with the ugly fractions, same thing. I don't like the negative attached to the x, so I switch both sides. I don't like the fraction, so I get rid of the bottom number by multiplying it to the top. This becomes negative 24 equals, that becomes 6 over 3x. And as usual, whenever you do that, the number here always is divisible. 6 divided by 3 is actually 2. In order to solve this, we rip the 2 off by dividing by 2. And the last one, before we get to something else, I think it says, what if it doesn't divide? But last one here, again, the first thing we don't like is the negative, so we switch both sides. Negative 3 becomes positive 3. The second thing we do is we get rid of the bottom number by multiplying it to both sides. This becomes 15 over 5x equals 15. 15 divided by 5 is actually 3x. And then to get rid of that 3, we simply divide it to both sides, getting x equals 5. So again, it's not so bad. The only thing that's different today is that whenever you see a negative attached to x, that you have to flip both sides. The four choices do not change. They will never change. They will be here for the rest of the time that you're in this class. Number 12. This is what happens if it doesn't divide. Here you see a 5x equals 18. We know that 5 is attached, and so we will divide both sides by 5. And for those of you who don't know multiplication, you'll do 18 divided by 5, which is fine. But if you get a number that is a decimal, we do not want decimal answers. Don't ever give me a decimal answer. Just reduce this as far as you can, which that is as far as it can go. So my general rule for you is if it does not divide, simply leave it as a mixed, not a mixed number, an improper fraction. Just leave it as the fraction that it was, 18 divided by 5, 18 over 5. If you look at 13, which was what we're going to wrap this up with, first thing is it's a negative 12, so we want a positive 12x equals negative 6. Second thing is, remember, and what I see people do all the time is they divide by what makes it nice. You must divide by what's attached to x. 12 is attached to x, so we want to divide by 12. Those two things go away. By the way, those two things went away. And here's the thing, when you do 6 divided by 12, you get a decimal, which means that's not what we're going to do, but we have to reduce this. 6 and 12 can both be divided by 2, so that means it's negative 3 over 6. Both of those can be divided by 3, which means it's negative 1/2 is where you want to stop. So again, the trick on this is you have to make sure you reduce any fraction. Even though you can't divide it and write that answer at 0.5, you have to therefore reduce as far as you can go on those things. But other than that, finish up the rest of this sheet. Get as much as you can done on that, and that is your participation. If you get to Math Excel, remember to write everything that you can down, and then that way you'll get your exit pass points. Good luck.